This is actually a very good chance for me to give quite a few reasons as to why I like her work, kind of talking through her ideas, looking at some of the shows that she's done this year, and kind of, doing things that way. So yeah, it should be a lot of fun going through that. Um, so she's had two main collections this year. She's had her Fall Winter 24 collection, which was titled Dream Study. She's also had her Spring Summer 25 collection, which was titled Midnight Palm. So first we'll be looking at Fall Winter 24, and then after we'll look at Spring Summer 25. So once again, if you guys want to read the show notes for the Fall Winter 24 collection, you can find it on Show Studio. Show Studio is a very, very great resource in terms of, finding the show notes and some other information when it comes to a lot of the collections for these brands. So as you can see, clearly titled on the show notes, it was titled Dream Study. Now, this collection is actually inspired by Howard University and Grace Wells Bonner spending more time in the USA. For context, Howard University is actually a university in Washington, D.C., and it's widely known as one of the oldest HBCUs. HBCU stands for Historically Black Colleges and Universities. And so essentially for this collection, she was kind of studying the archive of Howard University on a trip to DC. She was looking at the collegiate aesthetic. She was looking at the different yearbooks. That was actually one of the main inspiration points that she talked about in this collection. All of this information, by the way, is in the show notes. I'm just summarizing the show notes for you. So all this information, you can literally find it in the show notes. So yeah, she was looking at the American collegiate aesthetic. She was also, and it's actually, before I even go on to that, this collegiate kind of idea is something that I've seen Grace Wells Bonner do so many times historically. One of the first collections that I saw Grace Wells Bonner where I was like, this is really interesting, was Fall Winter 2019. I think that was also the first Grace Wells Bonner collection I ever reviewed. And the Fall Winter 2019 collection was when she was mixing like African tunics and African silhouettes with American football shirts. And that collection was very inspired by, HBCUs. And she's had other collections that look at HBCUs. I can't remember exactly all the years of all the collections, but I remember the Fall Winter 19 collection because I do remember that being a collection where I was like, oh, this is actually really interesting. But going back to this collection, she was looking at writers like Zora Neale Hurston and looking at all the other alumni of Howard University and like kind of looking at the impact they've made. Zora Neale Hurston is actually someone who, of course, is an alumni of Howard University, but she's a filmmaker and a writer who regularly portrayed racial struggles in the early 20th century, especially in the South of America. So Grace Wells Bonner kind of took inspiration from a lot of her work and also looking at other parts of the Howard archives, like I was saying, particularly the yearbooks from the 90s and kind of how they looked aesthetically and what the clothing looked like. But to quote her directly in her Vogue interview, which was actually a very interesting thing that she said, every year, and this is referring to the yearbooks and stuff like that when she was looking at the archives, she said, every year they have a homecoming with performances of different hip-hop artists coming to celebrate. So it was kind of both exploring the history of the place, but also this kind of musical intersection that's always been something important to me. So I was thinking about conscious and cosmic hip-hop, how it kind of takes on the mantle of intellectual thinking and kind of takes it further. And so that's a big reason why in this show you saw the likes of Yassine Bey, who's otherwise known as Mos Def, of course, a big hip-hop legend. He walked at the end with Grace Wells Bonner. He also performed during the show. That's why you see the varsity jackets. That's why you see, the sweatshirts. You see the shearling jackets, the suits. Something I really love about Grace Wells Bonner's work actually is her work And the tailoring and the aesthetic of the tailoring really reminds me of the Windrush generation. Um, and I know a lot of people, because a lot of my audience is American, you might not be too familiar with what the Windrush generation is. So I'll actually pause this video and see if I can put that on the screen just so that you guys can get a sense of the Windrush. But essentially in the UK, it's very important in UK history. There's something that we call Generation Windrush. So in 1948, a boat called Windrush actually docked in Tilbury in Essex in the UK, and it contained hundreds of passengers from the Caribbean who were essentially revitalizing Britain post-war. They changed the British Nationality Act around the time to give people from different British colonies the right to work and live in Britain. And so that's why this kind of like Generation Windrush is like a big thing, because it was like a big wave of immigration from the Caribbean. And why I'm mentioning this, actually, apart from obviously the like historical importance of it, is how they used to dress. Like, as you guys can see on the screen, they had a very specific style of tailoring that they used to wear that I see very heavily inspired in Grace Wells Bonner's work. And every time I see it, it just reminds me of that. It's so interesting to see. Like, I just see it and immediately I can see those references there in terms of the Windrush generation and how their tailoring looked, the prints and patterns, even the style of things, how they used to put things together. And I even think that she has referenced the Windrush generation before. I remember there was a lot of inspiration in one of her Adidas collabs where she made these Adidas tracksuits, which also looked like how the Windrush generation used to look back then, when they used to wear tracksuits. They had a very cool way of just putting things together and like always looking stylish, even though a lot of them had like limited resources. But you know, the best creativity comes out of restriction, as we know to be the case. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that quickly before we go back to the show, just so you have more context as to when it comes to the tailoring, why it looks that way and kind of where the inspiration has come from. Human Yu is asking me, are you familiar with the Black Ivy style? I also see that in her work too. She's so great at looking across the diaspora and finding those aesthetic threads. I totally agree, because like, even like I've said in past collections where she's kind of looking at African silhouettes and then kind of weaving those into collegiate looks and stuff, which I find really cool. So she does have a way of kind of, which is very hard, merging all those elements into one and everything still looking cohesive. So that's something that I'm a big fan of. And out of full transparency, to be very honest with all of you, when I first saw Grace Wells Bonner's work like years and years ago, it didn't actually resonate with me, because I almost felt like she was kind of trying to say what Black masculinity should be. I don't think she still does this, by the way. And I just had a bone to pick with that, because as a Black person, I'm very much of the opinion that I don't like any sort of singular way of looking at Black masculinity, because I think that is what happens to Black people a lot. I think that Black people, sometimes we aren't afforded the ability to be individuals. I think sometimes by society we're always judged as a group. So I'm very against any kind of way of kind of characterizing Black men or characterizing Black people as a certain way. And it kind of, to me at the start, seemed like she was trying to offer a vision of what Black masculinity or Black menswear should look like, which I was like, I don't know if I'm a fan of that. And it kind of reminds me of, if you guys remember, there was this time when Lola designed this white dress and it had a bullet hole. And I remember a lot of the critics at the time were saying that the bullet hole is a commentary on police brutality and stuff like that. And then Lola came out in an interview and she was like, no, actually the inspiration was, you know, actually about the horrific feeling of falling in love and then having your heart broken, right? And it's very funny because, and I put it on the screen just now, just for context, but it's very funny because this is what I mean by black people unafforded the ability to be individuals. We're always kind of put in boxes. And so that's kind of why Grace Wells Bonner's work didn't resonate with me at the start. But I think with time, as I've, gotten to really understand her work and I've really gotten into her work, I think with time, I've really started to understand what she's trying to do. And I can see clearly that she's not trying to do that. So I think with time, I've become more and more of a fan of Grace Wells Bonner's work. So yeah, we don't want to promote, this idea that all black people only eat chicken or listen to hip hop and all those kind of like reductive things that society likes to do to black people. But I'm not saying that Grace Wells Bonner does that, by the way. I think kind of her earlier work, the questions she was asking, I think were veering along those lines, but I don't think that she does that anymore, to be honest. She's done this across multiple collections. Is one, the styling is really nice. I love the styling. Two is she collaborated with the Savile Row tailors, Anderson and Shepherd, and they actually worked on a few of the looks in this collection. I'll show you guys when this runway video is finished. But it's really cool to actually have the Savile Row tailors kind of design their own looks and actually be involved in the collection, because I think a big thing of what she does is tailoring. Tailoring is really at the basis of a lot of what she does. Of course, there are these little elements, these embellishments that take inspiration from the diaspora, from African-American histories. You have to really look deeper. You have to do your research to really get those references. But on the nose of what it is, you have Savile Row tailors making a lot of these looks. So I'm a big fan of that. And that's luxury. Even on the Anderson and Shepherd Instagram page, which I'll show you guys later, they tell you exactly what fabrics they're using and where the fabrics come from too. So you can actually like find out these things for yourself and actually trace them. And in a luxury fashion space where everyone is so secretive, no one wants to talk about where their stuff is produced or where their fabrics come from because they know that they're doing some shady shit, it's very nice to see a brand like Wells Bonner actually being transparent in that sense. Ewan Yu says, I'm actually going to give a presentation to my co-workers about this very idea. Not everything black people produce is about our trauma. Exactly. People see like one bullet hole or something that's like, oh my God, it must be a reference to slavery. Or so it's like, there's just a very reductive way that people view black history and black culture. But I think that's mainly in the West that people do that though. We're getting the finale of the show. You can see all the look. But yeah, I was personally a fan of this show. I really liked how she was weaving the Howard archives and this kind of idea of like a collegiate uniform for a HBCU. I thought that was really cool. Also, you saw the continuation of the Adidas collab, which is very, very important in the Grace Wells Bonner world. What Wells Bonner is what the brand is called. I always say Grace Wells Bonner because I'm just used to saying it like that. But like Wells Bonner designed, for example, the Jamaican kit. I feel like it's only a matter of time before she has a really big break in fashion. I can see that a lot of people are resonating with her Adidas collabs, especially like the Sambas. We've seen like the silver ones, the sort of cheetah print ones. Those are like really, really big and a lot of people love those. I just put on the screen right now, those are the looks that are designed by Anderson and Shepherd. They've actually put it on their Instagram page. Also, you can see in the description, they talk about what fabrics are used and where it's from. So you can see, for example, it says a double-breasted overcoat of mid-grey, and the fabric is made by Holland and Sherry Apparel. It's 27.5 ounces of 100% wool cloth of midnight blue, fine corded cloth. So yeah, I love this. But yeah, having Savile, when the basis of your clothing is tailoring and you're working with Savile Row tailors, I think that's a very, very commendable thing. Thalia says, I picked up a prep sweater from the Adidas collab because of this collection. That's interesting. I also love the styling of Wells Bonner a lot of the time. I just absolutely love the styling. And this like pea coat with this like detailing is really nice. Yeah, really, I love the styling on these. And these boots, these kind of like boxy boots, I'm a big fan. And knowing Wells Bonner, there are probably embellishments somewhere. Or maybe there's different iterations where there's loads of embellishments on the footwear. Like, see, spoke too soon. Spoke way too soon. She loves an embellishment. And Wells Bonner makes a lot of good footwear outside of the collabs. I think people sleep on Wells Bonner footwear. I remember one of my friends, he has these Wells Bonner like clogs or mules, and they are so nice. So damn nice. I think people sleep on the footwear. I think we should move on to Wells Bonner's next collection, which was the Spring Summer 25 menswear collection. Once again, show notes, you can find them on Show Studio. And this collection is titled Midnight Palms. There's a big celebration of the work of the Trinidadian artist and textile designer called Althea McNish. She's actually very, very famous. She's widely regarded as one of the first internationally prominent Caribbean fashion designers in history. She's produced textiles for the likes of Christian Dior. She designed fabrics for Queen Elizabeth II. Queen Elizabeth II wore a lot of her fabrics when she was on her Caribbean tour. And Althea McNish has this very vibrant color scheme in a lot of her artwork. A lot of it is, I remember watching like one of her old interviews that she did where she was talking about the fact that she missed home a lot when she was in the UK. And so that's what led her to have all these like really vibrant colors and floral print in her artwork. And so you see a few bits of her artwork on some of the looks in this collection. You also see in the show notes, she was talking about this idea that, there's a kind of like a wardrobe. She's presenting a wardrobe inspired by kind of like what people would wear at night in a city that's by the sea. So that's why you have these nautical influences. That's why you see things like nylon anoraks or, swimwear that's kind of been made more chic, or you see like these striped knitwear pieces or these crocheted pieces. We also, once again, like I said, across many other collections, there was a collaboration with Anderson and Shepherd that continued in this collection. They designed a few of the looks in this collection too. I did like some of the styling of these looks. I'm definitely not, I wouldn't say I'm the biggest fan of this collection. Okay, here we can see one of the artwork pieces from Althea McNish, just to kind of show you guys where the references are. But yeah, I definitely prefer the previous collection to this collection, personally. Let's see what someone is saying. I love Wells Bonner, but even she has a very complex process for the clothes. The result is still normal clothes. So I guess an ongoing theme with what you guys are saying is that the depth of her research, which is actually very deep, doesn't show in the final product of the clothes, because the final product of the clothes ends up looking very commercial, which I think is actually a very good critique. My question back to you guys, the audience, would be, is that necessarily a bad thing? Because I feel like some designers, they can't find a perfect balance, in the sense that if their clothing is too commercial, people say it's commercial. If it's too experimental, people say it's too experimental. So if a good example is Craig Green, who has very experimental clothing. We just looked at his collection, and in the chat, I could see a lot of people saying that his work is too experimental and it's to his detriment. So you see what I'm saying? Like, you can't really, where's the middle ground? Where does someone win where it's the perfect balance between doing all this research and it's showing, but also not being too experimental? Just to show you guys on the screen, the looks that were designed by Anderson and Shepherd. This is their Instagram once again, showing you guys what they designed. So yeah, you can see some of the looks that they worked on. So yeah, it's great to see the Savile Row Taylors involved a lot in her brand. But that's Grace Wells Bonner in a nutshell. Like I was saying, I'm definitely a big fan of her work. I think that she is she's on the cusp of being mainstream. I don't know if, would you guys say that Grace Wells Bonner is mainstream yet? I don't think so. But I remember when the Louis Vuitton collection was up for grabs, people put names forward like Grace Wells Bonner and Martine Rose, and the fact that her name was there shows that there are a lot of people that, you know, want to see Grace Wells Bonner at the top of fashion. Even I saw part of the discourse when we were talking about Chanel. A lot of people were saying that Grace Wells Bonner should go to Chanel. I think a lot of people want to put her forward for those things, but I think she's on the cusp, definitely. And I like the fact that she designed the Jamaican football kit. I actually like that kit, by the way. I think she's slowly growing, and I think it's a matter of time before we see like her have a big break in fashion, to be honest. Even down to like the celebrities she styles, a lot of celebrities seem to resonate with her work and they wear it. There's people like Solange that obviously wear Grace Wells Bonner. So yeah, really, really cool. And I like kind of looking into her ideas. Grace Wells Bonner actually reminds me of J.W. Anderson in the sense that when I have to review a Wells Bonner collection, or I have to look deeply, I always learn something, because in the process of finding out what her research was, I have to research her research in a sense. So then you start learning about these different things that happened in history. It's very similar to J.W. Anderson, because I think that J.W. Anderson does that very well too. J.W. Anderson will do research on very obscure things that make me have to research the research, and then I learn about those things that he's referencing too, which is very, very interesting. It's really, really good. So yeah, that's Grace Wells Bonner in a nutshell. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.